Morning, Your Honor. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for being with us, of course.
Good morning.
Very interested in the conversation we've heard so far, and I want to just follow up some of the comments Senator Kissel and Representative Fishbein made with regard to how we do things and our differences with D.C. and so forth. Some might argue that those are deficiencies, but that's another conversation altogether. I have a couple of questions. I just want to speak with you generally, and then I have a more specific question. And the first one really has to do with question 5 that is on the survey that we provide and you've responded to for nominees. And this is the one that asks about, do you believe the Connecticut Constitution provides the same rights and protections as the U.S. Constitution, et cetera? And I have an issue with the question itself because for someone like me who is a conservative Republican, I believe that rights come from God or a creator, if you will. And so I don't really like the way the question is worded to begin with. But in your answer, you respond by saying that you believe the state constitution provides greater rights and protections than the federal constitution, and that also states are free to develop constitutional rights and protections separate from federal guarantees. And I'm just curious whether or not you adopted this use of wording from the question, or if that's really your view that rights come from government, or whether they come from God and the duty of government is to preserve those rights.
Yes, I was answering the question specifically and what was asked, and some of the language does track the question, but in actuality, that's our system. The federal constitution does provide some rights, and the state constitution also provides rights, and we can provide greater rights than the federal constitution.
Right. Maybe some of this conversation has to do with, how we're using the term rights. I noticed also in your answer, you mentioned that, for example, the state of Connecticut provides a right to education. And I know that's commonly held and people use that terminology all the time. But the word right doesn't appear in the Constitution with regard to education. It's simply, in my opinion, I would more accurately describe it as a guaranteed entitlement because it's something the government is providing. For me, rights are something that you have naturally, and that the government's not in a position to do anything except for inhibit your access to that. So I don't know if that really helps me. In the political realm, the tension between the political parties is between what the role of government. I would say the role of government is to protect rights and to advance the cause of citizens being able to achieve on their own. And others might argue that the government has a much larger role to play in how we live our lives. And I don't want to put you on the spot to make a political determination, but for me, it's with great interest when I am, faced with, voting on a nomination, whether or not that judge or justice in your case, shares my worldview, that the role of government is to effectively protect rights that are already held by citizens, or the government is there determining what is allowed by citizens.
So I will answer it this way. I was not answering that question sort of philosophically about where rights come from and what rights are. I was answering solely in the context of what was asked about the United States Constitution and what it contains and what our state constitution contains. And as a judge, I wouldn't profess to make those broad political statements about where rights generally come from. So I simply was answering, in question 5, I was answering exactly what was asked about what's in the federal constitution and how that relates to the state constitution.
Understood. Okay, and forgive me, I don't. My intention is not to press you on the subject. Really, I was just trying to get a more of a philosophical worldview kind of response. Mm-hmm. But I'll just move on. One of your comments this morning, you mentioned judicial restraint as a priority, and it leads me to my second question, which is regarding the Soto versus Bushmaster case. And maybe you could just describe for me your thought process in siding with the majority.
I'm hesitating only because I hadn't researched whether the case is fully resolved. We had the case addressing some preliminary issues in the matter, with whether summary judgment would be proper. And so once we the majority decided that it wasn't, the case went back for further proceedings. So I'm very hesitant to make a public comment on a case that may come back to us because of the rules of judicial conduct. I can't make a public comment on a pending case or a matter that might come before us, because that would lead to me having to disqualify myself in a case. And the code sort of speaks to not putting yourself in a position to have to disqualify yourself.
Yeah, I certainly understand. Through you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to put you on the spot once again, but this is an important issue for me. I mean, as far as I know, the case has been resolved. I mean, Bushmaster settled out of court, but you're right that I don't know that the individual circumstances of what was before the Supreme Court has been finally resolved. My understanding, reading the majority's opinion, which I know you didn't author, but you did agree with, is that effectively the federal law that provided for the firearm manufacturers' protection from liability allowed for a predicate exemption. And the facts in this particular case that was before you was really about whether or not the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act could apply in that regard. And I'm a non-lawyer, by the way, Your Honor. So this stuff is a little deep for me, but I spend a lot of time and energy trying to understand it fully. As a lawmaker, I feel like we have an obligation to truly understand. But I'm looking at this case and seeing that not only for me did I think it was a stretch to impact firearms manufacturers by using CUTPA as a mechanism to get at something which I think the federal law implicitly was designed to protect against, but also just my concern over the expansion of the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act itself. Again, if you don't want to comment on it, I certainly can't force you, but I would love to hear your view. There are people that are certainly paying attention to your nomination from a standpoint of concern over where you fall on the Second Amendment, the rights of firearm manufacturers to engage in advertising, and more importantly, just anyone, businesses in general, being able to engage in trade practices without coming into conflict with a widely expanded version of that Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act. So any insight you can give me into any of those questions will be valuable in determining how I will vote. And I'm certain that there are other folks on the committee that are interested as well, and certainly folks that have contacted me knowing that I would be here today in this position of asking you some questions. And I'll leave it at that. Please share anything you like with me, and I appreciate your time and your willingness to be before us, and you're willing to serve on the court. Thank you.
Just before you begin, Justice Mullins, just so we're clear, we certainly as a committee understand, and going through this, know you can't comment on pending cases. So if you're unsure whether the particular case is still pending or may come back, please leave that out. If you'd like to generally address the question, as the good senator said, feel free, but please do avoid the specifics of a pending case if you could.
I appreciate that, and I was going to. How I would answer your question is, you could look at my record and I have a full record now from the appellate court and the Supreme Court of cases that I've authored, and I think you would be able to see that when the issue comes before me, I don't have an agenda. I am truly trying to decide what's right in that case. I'm not necessarily interested in expanding CUTPA, but I'm interested in trying to get to the right decision in each particular case. So for your constituents or for your own edification, that's the approach I've had, and that's the approach I'm going to continue to have, and that will be to exercise judicial restraint and decide only the issues that are before me.